Okay, so Algebra 2, Q3, Reflections of Functions. Hopefully in Algebra 1, you were taught that anytime you see f of x is the same thing as y. I'm going to be using that information a lot in this lesson. Okay, so if we have f of x and it is a negative in front of the f of x, then that means that we're putting a negative in front of the y, which means every term changes signs. If every term changes signs, then it's going to be, if we were to graph them, it would be a reflection about the x. So what I'm trying to, I'll be saying a lot again. Oops, I didn't. If y changes, or if every term changes, then it's going to be a reflection about x. And then if just the x term changes, it's a reflection about the y. It's kind of opposite. If y changes, then it's a reflection about the x. If x changes, then it's a reflection about the y. Okay, let's get started. Alright, so find g of x, where g of x is a reflection about the x. So if we're reflecting about the x, then we are changing y. If we're changing y, we're changing every term. Now, how many terms are there? This one term and two terms. So I'm going to put a negative in front of the 5. Now, this 5 does not change because it is part of the first term, but the negative 2 that's in purple does change to be a positive 2. So can we find that anywhere in this problem? Yes. We're going to change reflect about x. If we're reflecting about x, then we are changing f of x, which is the same thing as changing y, which means that we're changing everything. So that 5 is going to become a negative 5. That negative 1 is going to become a positive 1. So there we go. Now we're going to reflect about the x. If we're reflecting about the x, then the only thing changes is the x. So watch what happens if I put, so here's your x. I'm going to make it negative, but there's no parentheses over here, so what would I do? I would multiply here, and a negative 7 times a negative x is positive 7, but the 3 stays positive. So that would be our answer. Reflect about the x, so we're going to change everything. So the negative 5 becomes positive. The 4 stays negative because it's part of the 5, and the negative 2 becomes positive 2. So here are 2 positive 2s. Here are 2 positive 5s, but what's the difference? These signs, and the 4 stayed negative. So it's going to be that one right there. We're reflecting about the y, so we're just changing the x. Now, I'm just going to do it this way, but the 3 stays negative. We just changed that x term. I saved about 5 minutes of telling you that basically that negative 9 goes to a positive 9 whenever we have a quantity squared and everything. So here's positive 6. Oh, no, my bad. Okay, so positive 6 right there, and then a negative 3, but I need the positive 9 also. So there we are. Reflect about the y. So the x is going to change. So the 9 doesn't, but the 4 inside does, and the 4 on the outside does not. Now we're going to be writing them. If we're reflecting about the y, we are only going to change the x. We are not changing everything. We're just changing the x. And here is f of x. Now watch this. In reality, I would be putting a negative x right there. But the absolute value, if you take the absolute value of anything, you just make it positive. So even though that x is negative, because we're taking the absolute value of it, it's going to stay positive. So basically what happens is it doesn't change when we are just reflecting about the y-axis. We're going to reflect about the x, so we're changing the y. Now watch this. This is totally different than what we just did. And let me see if I can bring both of them up. Let me squish it. Okay. So we have the same exact question, or same exact equation, but different question. When we reflected about the y, we just changed the x. If we're reflecting about the x, then we're changing the y, which means that we would put the negative on the outside. And a negative on the outside is not going to go positive because it's not on the inside. So we have two totally different answers depending on which one we are reflecting. Okay, x. So we're going to change the y, and changing the y is putting the negative on the outside. Reflecting about the y, so we're going to change the x. Now on this one, there isn't an x squared. There's not an absolute value. There's no exponent or anything like that. So it's going to stay negative x. Change about the x, or reflect about the x, so we're going to change the y. If we're changing the y, we're changing everything, which means basically just change your signs right there. If we're going to reflect about the y, then we're going to change the x, which means I'm going to put parentheses. I'm going to leave the 2 there, and I'm going to put a negative x inside. But squared means multiply it by itself, so a negative x times a negative x is a positive x. So we would end back up with x squared. So on this one, reflect about the y, so we're just going to change the x. So the 6 becomes negative, and the 9 stays positive. Reflect about the x, so we're going to do the y, and the y means everything. So this negative 2 is going to become a positive 2. The 4 stays positive, and the other 2 goes positive. Because this is one term, and at the very beginning I said we're going to change everything, but we're going to change every term, not every sign. Reflect about the y, so we're just going to change the x. If we're just going to change the x, then the 9 changes, but the 6 and the 7 do not change. I think this is the last one. Yeah, last problem. Reflect about the y, so we're just going to change the x. So the 5 stays positive, the 2 becomes positive, the square is still there, and the 3 stays negative. Let me know if you need any help.